Hello students, in our last module, we have separated salt and sand by using the processes of sedimentation, decantation and evaporation. So here is our sand, which was the sediment, and here is our salt. Now if you remember, then we had taken the mixture of salt and sand in the ratio of 3:1, which meant that salt was 3 times the sand in the mixture. And here you can see that we have recovered only a small part of the salt. So where did the rest of the salt go? Well, let's check the sand particles which were settled at the bottom of the beaker as sediment. And students, if you carefully observe the sand particles, then you'll be surprised to see that there are some particles of salt along with it. Now, how is it possible for these salt particles to settle down in water as sediment, even when they have the ability to get dissolved in water? And why some of the salt does not dissolve in water? So here, I want to introduce to you a new concept, which is of saturated solution. But before I proceed further, first tell me, can water dissolve any amount of substance in it? Because we know that salt dissolves in water. But what will happen if we keep on adding salt to a fixed quantity of water? Well, let's try to answer this question by doing a simple activity. So here is a beaker which is filled with some water. And let's add 1 spoon of salt in it and stir it well. So I add salt into it and now I stir it. Okay, so students, do you observe any salt particles being suspended or settled at the bottom of the beaker? No, right? And that's because on stirring, the salt got dissolved in water. Now let's repeat this step once again. And again, I add a spoon of salt to this water now. And again, we are going to stir it. And once again, you can see that the salt, it disappears. That is, it gets dissolved into water. Now, if we keep on adding the salt onto this solution one by one, rather into this solution one by one, and we keep on stirring it as well, so one last spoon. Now students, just observe this. Can you observe any peculiar thing regarding the property of salt here? Well, if you carefully observe, then you will find that salt, rather than getting dissolved in the water, now it starts settling at the bottom of the beaker, as we have seen in the case of sedimentation also. And now the question arises that why water, it refuses to dissolve salt in it after a particular point of time? Well, it is so because the concentration of salt in water has reached a certain limit, where no more salt can be dissolved into it. And no matter how much we stir the solution, the salt, it does not get dissolved in it. The salt we add won't dissolve, rather it gets settled down at the bottom of the beaker. And that's when we call the solution to be a saturated solution. So can you now define what is a saturated solution? Well, the solvent such as water here contains the maximum concentration of solute such as the salt at a given temperature. And when it is incapable of absorbing or dissolving the solute anymore, that's when the solution is said to be a saturated solution. Now, can you give me an example of a saturated solution from your day-to-day life? Well, soda water is the most widely used saturated solution. In soda bottle or can, water is a solvent and carbon dioxide is added as a solute to that extent beyond which the water is unable to dissolve it anymore at a given temperature and pressure. And when the pressure is released, carbon dioxide gas forms bubbles and it goes out of the solution. So this is one of the example of a saturated solution.